My name is Jack, and Christmas has always held a special place in my heart. The lights, the warmth, the joy of being with family, it was all so magical. But one Christmas Eve in 2014, my holiday spirit was shattered by an experience that still chills me to the bone. It started when my wife, Emma, and I decided to spend Christmas at our old family cabin in the mountains. It had been years since we last visited, and we thought it would be a perfect place to escape the hustle and bustle of city life. The cabin was quaint and cozy, nestled among snow-covered trees, and we looked forward to a peaceful holiday. We arrived on the afternoon of Christmas Eve, the sun already dipping below the horizon. The cabin felt warm and welcoming just as I remembered it. We decorated a small tree, lit a fire, and settled in for a quiet evening. As the night grew darker, the snow began to fall more heavily, blanketing everything in a serene, white silence. Around midnight, we were sitting by the fire, sipping hot cocoa and listening to Christmas carols, when we heard a soft knock at the door. It was unusual given how remote the cabin was, but I assumed it was a late-night visitor lost in the storm. I opened the door, expecting to see a neighbor or a traveler in need of help. Instead, I was met with a chilling sight. A tall, gaunt figure dressed in tattered, old-fashioned clothing. His eyes were hollow and dark, and a sinister smile spread across his face. He held out a gloved hand, and in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of winter, he said, "Merry Christmas." Fear gripped me, but I managed to stammer a reply. "Merry Christmas. Can I help you?" The man's smile widened. "May I come in? It's so very cold outside." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let him in. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop instantly, and a sense of dread settled over me. Emma looked at me with concern, but I reassured her with a nod. The visitor sat by the fire, his eyes never leaving mine. He didn't speak, but the silence was filled with an oppressive, almost tangible weight. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice like a cold wind. "This place holds many memories, doesn't it?" I nodded, unsure of how he knew. "Yes, it does. My family has owned this cabin for generations." He smiled again, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Do you know the history of this place?" I shook my head, sensing the conversation was about to take a dark turn. He leaned forward, his eyes burning into mine. "Many years ago, a man lived here alone. He was an outsider, shunned by the local community. On Christmas Eve, he was found dead in the snow, his heart frozen with sorrow. A chill ran down my spine. That's terrible. But what does it have to do with us?" The visitor's smile faded, replaced by a look of sadness. "He was my ancestor. His spirit still roams these woods, seeking solace on the coldest of nights." Panic surged through me. "We didn't mean to intrude. We'll leave." The visitor held up a hand. "No need. He only wants company to share in the warmth of Christmas." Before I could respond, the fire flared up, casting an eerie glow around the room. The visitor's form began to shimmer, and he whispered one last time, "Merry Christmas," and then he was gone. The cabin was silent, the fire crackling softly. Emma and I stared at each other, the weight of the encounter pressing down on us. We left the cabin the next morning, unable to shake the feeling that we had shared our Christmas with a ghost. Whether it was a hallucination or a genuine encounter with the supernatural, I'll never know. But one thing is certain, the Christmas visitor will haunt my memories forever. It all started on Christmas Eve just a few years ago. I had just moved into an old Victorian house in a quiet, snowy town in upstate New York. The house had been on the market for years, its dilapidated charms scaring off buyers. But I saw it differently. The creaky floorboards, peeling wallpaper, and antique fixtures felt like a project, something to make my own. Little did I know the house had plans of its own for me. I was alone that night. My parents were celebrating the holidays abroad, and my siblings were busy with their families. It was my first Christmas alone, but I didn't mind. The idea of a quiet evening with a bottle of wine and a classic Christmas movie sounded perfect. I decorated the living room with a modest tree, hung stockings, and strung twinkling lights across the mantel. The fireplace crackled softly, filling the room with warmth. Around 11 p.m., I decided to head to bed. As I climbed the creaky staircase, I thought I heard something, a faint shuffling sound coming from downstairs. I froze midway up the steps, listening. The house settled often and the wind howled outside, so I chalked it up to that. Still, a sliver of unease settled in my chest. I shook it off and went to bed, leaving the bedroom door slightly ajar. I wasn't scared, just cautious. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the wind outside grew fiercer, rattling the windows. I closed my eyes and tried to drift off. That's when I heard it. A soft, deliberate creak. Not from the wind or the house settling. It came from the stairs. Someone, or something, was climbing them step by slow step. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might burst. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, but it wasn't there. I must have left it downstairs. Stupid. The sound stopped, but the silence was worse. I strained to hear anything, breathing, shuffling, movement. Nothing. Then, just as I started to relax, I heard it again, closer this time. A faint, dragging sound like fabric brushing against the walls. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Suddenly, I remembered the flashlight in the nightstand drawer. My fingers fumbled to grab it, and when I finally clicked it on, the weak beam of light illuminated the hallway outside my room. It was empty. No shadowy figure. No intruder. Just the stillness of the old house. I mustered the courage to get up, flashlight in hand. I peered into the hallway, my pulse racing. That's when I saw it. A trail of wet footprints, leading from the staircase to my door. They weren't ordinary footprints, though. They were small, child-sized, and scattered with drops of something dark and wet. Blood. My stomach turned as I followed the trail with the beam of the flashlight. It stopped right outside my door. My breath hitched as I swung the light down the staircase. For a split second, I thought I saw movement, a figure darting into the shadows. My hands trembled as I stepped back into the room, shutting the door and locking it. My mind raced. Who, or what, was in my house? How did they get in? I pushed a chair against the door and sat in it, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. Minutes felt like hours. The wind outside howled and the house groaned, but nothing else happened. I convinced myself it was my imagination, some trick of the mind brought on by the isolation and eerie ambience of the old house. But then I heard it again. This time it wasn't footsteps. It was laughter, soft, childlike, and impossibly close. My blood ran cold as I turned the flashlight toward the corner of the room. The beam flickered, and for a moment I saw it. A small figure, no taller than a child, dressed in a tattered Christmas sweater, its face pale and expressionless. Its eyes, black as coal, stared directly into mine. The flashlight went out. I screamed, scrambling to turn it back on, but when I did, the figure was gone. The laughter, however, lingered, echoing through the room. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair, flashlight aimed at the door until the first light of dawn broke through the window. The police found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. They chalked it up to stress and lack of sleep. But I know what I saw. I moved out of that house a week later, unable to bear another night there. Every Christmas since, I've heard it. The faint sound of laughter just as I'm drifting off to sleep. No matter where I am, no matter who I'm with, it finds me. And every year I wonder, what will happen when it finally decides to do more than laugh?